Okay, hello and welcome to AccessKaneh's Conversations. And today we're speaking with Jesse Lavoie of Toba Grown. Hello and welcome to you, Jesse. How are you?
Good, buddy. I miss these calls with you. Working with you, getting up 4 a.m. Winnipeg time to do some
To
9
do some
a.m. UK
cannabis
calls.
stuff. Absolutely. When we used to work with one of the big Canadian companies in the cannabis industry and how things have changed. So, Jesse, tell me, when did Canada first legalize cannabis?
For medical purposes, it was all the way back in 2001, so we're 20 years ago. So we've had a lot of time to pave some roads in the cannabis industry on the medical front, and on the recreational side, we legalized October 17th in 2018.
And how is it? So, if it, in 2001, when it was legalized for medical use, was it widely adopted or was it kind of as it is in the UK now? Because now, since 2018, so we're only a full 2 decades behind Canada, essentially. We catch up in the end, the mother country. The little children run off, do their thing, and we follow them and we catch up eventually. So, how did it change in those 20 years?
Well, initially, it was obviously there was a select number of doctors who were willing to prescribe medical cannabis back in 2001. It also opened the gates to more research being done on the medical benefits, which then in turn started changing more opinions of more doctors who then became more comfortable prescribing. And that system, how you were able to get medical cannabis is you go see a doctor, they prescribe you the medical cannabis, you take that prescription to a licensed producer. So there were just a few at the time. Obviously, that list has blown up now. But you take that prescription to that licensed producer, and they would mail you your medical cannabis. So that went on for quite some time. And then in 2018, recreational cannabis came to us, and it was amazing. It was a blessing, and still evolving. And now you can go to a brick and mortar store and buy cannabis after talking to a educated staff on hundreds of different strains and different kinds of products. You can go online and have companies like Pineapple Express deliver cannabis right to your door, like a Skip the Dishes or I'm not sure the version in UK.
Uber Eats or Deliveroo?
Perfect. So just like that, someone coming to your door, checking your ID, like, okay, you're Jesse, you're 28, perfect. Here's your cannabis. Enjoy your night. Uh, so yeah, it's it's pretty awesome.
So, has that affected? Is there still medical cannabis? Is it all just access now? Is there any difference between the two?
So yeah, there's definitely still medical cannabis. There's lots of benefits around medical cannabis. You can write it off on your taxes. Certain insurance companies are reimbursing for it. So if your work has a cannabis portion in their package, like for example, at Canopy, we have a healthcare spending account that can be used towards medical cannabis. So that's, people who have a medical prescription in Canopy, for example, can utilize that benefit and get reimbursed for up to a certain amount of their cannabis. So obviously it's a very big benefit because legal cannabis is still expensive. Prices are coming down. It's way more expensive than going onto an illegal gray market website where you can buy cannabis for about bulk for $2 to $3 Canadian and have it mailed to your front door. There's lots of this going on. Like the people who are connoisseurs, that's who need a gram or two a day and really want quality. They usually go to a lot of these websites.
And that's $2 to $3 per gram?
Yeah, Canadian.
Right, okay, okay. So there's a couple of really interesting things in there. One, you get medical cannabis or can get medical cannabis reimbursed by either your company or the state in one way or another.
They're private insurance companies here,
Right.
so certain companies have it in their programs, and obviously you pay into that with your premiums. But yeah, it's quite interesting.
So what's the price of a legal store dispensary gram of cannabis compared to the kind of still one assumes the illicit market?
Think of it when you go into a liquor store, an alcohol store in the UK. You can have beer that's extremely cheap and maybe doesn't taste great, still gets you drunk, but then you can go all the way up to, like the massively expensive bottles of whiskey or wine, etc. In a cannabis store, we see you can get some, and I don't want to, because I haven't been going to stores as much as I used to, so, but I'm just going to say some numbers.
Okay.
From what I've seen, you can, on the low end, $3 to $5 per gram for stuff it'll still get you high, but it's not like the $20 Canadian gram. That's like the premium stuff, apparently, with the premium brands. And then in between there, you can find some really good stuff. Licensed producers are really good at what they do. Prices are like a liquor store all over the place.
No, I was interested because I think there's still quite a big illicit market in Canada. Now, one of the things that's happening in the UK is that once you've been seen by a consultant, which has a cost, but once you've proved a medical need, you can get medical cannabis below the cost of illicit market cannabis here. Illicit market cannabis will be about £10 a gram, and the most inexpensive or the least inexpensive cannabis in the medical market is £5 a gram. So there's a real difference between the pricing, and it looks like the medical market is going to come down because volumes, because all the Canadian companies are seeing the UK as a really interesting environment to operate in. So the prices are coming down, but that doesn't seem to be the same in Canada, where the illicit market has been undercut.
Well, you just mentioned, is it 10 pounds on the illicit market?
Yeah.
A gram?
Yeah.
Well, let's use $1.50 or £1.50 as the conversion rate. $1.50 per gram on the illicit market here for like premium stuff versus $10 pounds in the UK, right? So
you're saying $1.50? Yeah,
that's what you can get, £1.50. So that, if that's even a saying there, but
no,
so
£1.50.
If the government was to come in, it's like, hey, we're gonna match the 150 and below. Like, there would be no industry here. It would.
You're right. Okay. That's really interesting. That just shows you the volumes that are actually transacting in Canada compared to here. What have you got any idea of the kind of percentage of people? Has it increased the number of people that are using cannabis in Canada since regulated access was allowed in 2018?
I don't have that stat, unfortunately.
No.
I'm letting the viewers down.
It wasn't on the list of questions. Oh yes, absolutely. One of the interesting things going on here is about driving and cannabis use. What is the regulation? Is it a kind of micrograms per milliliter of blood, or is there some other evaluation on whether you're competent to drive?
So where I live, and my understanding of it, I live in the center of Canada, Manitoba. Federally, it's don't drink and drive, don't use cannabis and drive, don't use drugs in general and drive. That's like the concrete rules. But the sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say there must be a limit. So there's a kind of limit that you're set.
I'm getting to it.
Hey,
I'm getting to it. Yeah, we Canadians are patient. We're coming. I'm getting there. So here it's a zero tolerance thing. So you're driving. Mm-hmm. If there's any suspicion that you have had cannabis, what they will do is they will take a a Q-tip or a swab and swab your mouth, and cannabis can be traced in your mouth for over 24 hours. So if you had a joint last night, and if you have a cop that wants to, check you, they'll then they'll do a swab. If it tests positive, they'll bring you downtown and do a blood test. And then if there's cannabis in your blood, which it stays in your blood for a very long time, then they have all this evidence against you that you were driving under the influence. So it is very strict here on the driving part.
But surely that means you're never able to drive. If you're consuming cannabis on a daily basis, it's always going to be in your system. I mean, that's one of the things here about medical cannabis, that there's now a medical cannabis defense for people who are not impaired, but technically over the limit, which is 2 micrograms of THC per milliliter of blood. So that is the level that they set. But if you have a medical prescription, you have a medical defense. Now, the thing is, are you impaired to drive? And how do the police evaluate that? That has not yet been established here.
Same here. So to answer your question, you don't want to give them the idea that you may have smoked weed recently, because that's what starts the whole process.
Gotcha.
If your car smells like weed, your eyes are red, you're acting goofy, then there is suspicion to start the process for seeing if you have weed in your system. I'd have a rough time. Not because I smoke and drive, but I use cannabis every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I could. That's why I'm very careful, like a lot of people I know are.
No, that's interesting that Canada has kind of created this market, but hasn't yet worked out the kind of technicalities around this. And that's maybe a lesson for the UK, where things are hopefully will follow on to where Canada is as time moves forward. As we've said, Canada's had medical access for 20 years. So you've kind of developed this process, and you've found that it's safe, and you've found that it's well tolerated, and then you've moved forward to a kind of adult use market. Whereas in the UK, we've just literally 2018, we've just embarked on this kind of medical thing. And we think that we're the forerunners in the world, and we're actually pretty much behind everybody else at the moment. So it's one of these things that we're going to work out one way or another. And it's interesting to hear that the similar things are there. One of the things that is always brought up here about cannabis is underage use. And then actually there was a report today that was highlighting the fact of how easy it is for cannabis to be obtained by underage children, underage being 18. What's the requirement in Canada for the age, and has underage use increased or decreased?
So the age here is, there's some provinces who are 18, some who are 19. All cannabis that's sold legally has to come in a child-proof container. From our research, obviously there are cases of it happening, but there are cases of it happening with alcohol, with prescription drugs, with tobacco, with a lot of other things. So on the stat part about underage increase or decrease, from what I've heard, it hasn't changed much, but don't quote me on that one either.
Well, I'll quote Canada Health on the Canada Stats website, and it's actually gone down slightly. So there is a real advantage to kind of regulated access. And I think because of the allure of kind of, and when you're a child being slightly, let's call it naughty, or whatever you kind of characterize it as, there's an allure to do this thing that your parents wouldn't approve of. I think that's maybe why it's gone down, because your parents are doing it, so I'm not going to do it. So it's kind of an interesting area. We spoke about the fact that there are cannabis stores, dispensaries in Canada. What kind of products do they sell? Is it all just flower, or are there other kinds of products as well?
Yeah, it's a wide range now, because we had an initial year of just flower and tincture oils, so oils with MCT, or cannabis oil with MCT. oil in it as well. So that went on for a year. And then we went Cannabis 2.0, where like oil pens such as this one, edibles, drinks, tea bags, tons
Tea
of different,
bags.
yeah, gummies, brownies, cookies, hash, resin, shatter. That's all. It's a big open market now, but heavily regulated. So I'll give you an example of how it's a little backwards. So a cannabis drink, from a normal user, you need one or two to feel pretty good. But legally, you can only buy, depending on the milligrams, no more than 5, sometimes 4 of them. But then you can go into the store and buy these cartridges,
Yeah.
and walk out with like 10 or 20 in your pocket. And there's so much more THC in these than you will get in 4 or 5 drinks. So I get it. It's, a rollout, something new. We gotta like be precautious, but also like let's compare notes here and be okay. Well, this doesn't add up.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. You speak about THC because here, obviously, we only have access to medical cannabis. I am a medical cannabis patient, by the way. So I have a range of kind of medical cannabis vaporizers. You can only vaporize medical cannabis in this country. And you can get the tinctures, and there are new products coming around, but we don't have the range that you have. But one of the things that the UK government it only is concerned about THC or CBD. Now, in Canada, do they recognize the complete range of kind of cannabinoids, CBN, CBGs, and terpenes?
Absolutely. So all that's pretty much marketing for your company. You want to like talk about all that stuff you have within regulations, of course. So yeah, that's obviously a big part of it. And in the States, you're starting to see new like D9 CBD and new things popping up.
Jesse, do you know anything about Delta 9, Delta 8 THC? They're mystery to me. I don't know anything about them yet.
They're like specializing. So we started with the whole sativa, indica. That was like which one is it? Like kind of thing. Then hybrid came along, and then now we're diving into THC, CBD, different terpenes, that whole profile. And now with like Delta 9 and other things similar to that, it's like taking CBD and going deeper, and then like, oh, what's that? Pulling that out, and eventually we'll go deeper into that one. So it's just the technology and all the science and research that's going into it is just uncovering new things that if you isolate, you get different effects. So I know on D9 it's like it's just way more potent. Like for example, here I'll use an example here. I'll use some. Can I put cannabis on the flower?
Absolutely.
On the camera, I mean. So regular CBD flower.
Yeah.
Science goes into there, pulls something that even more isolated out of it, and turns it into oil.
Yeah.
So all of that isolating and then amplifying once you have it isolated, we're gonna start seeing a lot more of that. So there's thousands of strains that all need to be studied, and I'm sure we're gonna uncover even more and more things.
So what we just mentioned strains here. There's we call them strains and cultivars. It's an interchangeable term, but in reality, the cultivars. What are the most popular cultivars in Canada at the moment?
I love the difference in like strains, cultivars, just the different terminology.
We're very led by the science. We're following more the Australians than the Canadians. The Canadians didn't actually do that much science for the last 2 decades, whereas the Australians were very science-led, and we're going down that kind of Australian route, but swerving to the Canadian kind of landscape, I think, as we go. It's going to be very interesting. The way this works out, who knows? And you've already established, but what are the kind of big strains in Canada at the minute?
So you're gonna go down under before you come up here.
Yeah. That's right.
Hey.
We'll get onto your UK kind of connections later on.
I love the UK. My sister and her family live there. Before COVID, I was coming there every couple months. I just love it there.
Well, we were actually going to talk about you're a UK citizen. We'll come back to that later on because it may have some very interesting possibilities. Anyway, you never told me what the popular cultivars were in strains. Whatever you want. Is it Stardog still, or is it some new strain that is available?
The big one, and you see tons of following on it on YouTube, is Remo. I don't know. Have you heard of Remo?
Remo Nutrients.
Yeah, Remo Nutrients. He has frosted fruitcakes, and they're like massive nugs that he grows, and obviously that's good PR for his company when he's producing such massive buds. But he's such a good grower, in my opinion. There's tons of people like this, and if other people are like, hey, how come you didn't mention me, I apologize. There's tons of really good growers, but I'd say that one is very sought after because you can't get it anywhere, and it's highly marketed.
Okay, I've made a note. I'll try and hunt it down and see whether we can bring it into the UK as a medical strain. It needs to be EU GMP grown for it to be a medical strain. So that's one thing the UK's done. It's offshored all of its cannabis growing to Canada for some bizarre reason. I can't quite work it out myself, but there we go. It is something that we're moving forward on. We will eventually, in fact, there's a company called GW Pharmaceuticals that were the originator of medical cannabis, and they grow lots of cannabis in this country, but it's all exported all over the world. We don't actually, the cannabis that you can get in this country as medical cannabis is not yet grown in this country. It primarily comes from Canada at the moment. So that's one of the things. So let's move on from industrial growing and let's talk about Toba Grown. Tell me about Toba Grown.
So Toba Grown was launched in late August 2020. So we're coming up on a year here. We got a few more months, obviously. But I launched a lawsuit against the Manitoba government. That's my provincial government of the province I live in, for banning homegrown cannabis for personal use. So here in Canada, you can legally, federally grow 4 cannabis plants for recreational purposes. Manitoba and Quebec were the only provinces who banned it. Quebec put a $250 fine on it. Manitoba put a $2,500 fine on it. And in 2019, Quebec's ban was defeated because it was ruled unconstitutional. Someone was caught there and they fought it in the system. Here, no one was caught. No one was real. Or there was one person, but it kind of was dropped. And it seems like they're not enforcing it because they don't want someone to challenge it. So what I've done is I hired a big law firm initially. We built a very strong case, tons of research, made very concrete arguments. I personally started calling doctors, executives, anyone I could find who's an expert in the cannabis field, and built a very large stack of expert affidavits, which are sworn statements backing up our entire case. And yeah, we're in the process right now, waiting for the government to decide if they're going to cross-examine us or not. We've already submitted all of our evidence and affidavits, and we're hoping to be in court by the end of this year, if not early next. And it's, I'm fighting for our federal 4 and to end provincial discrimination. There's 1.3 million people that live in this province. There's 38 million in Canada. So why are we the ones who are left and not allowed to do something that's federally legal?
So you're the kind of reverse of the way it is in the UK, because in the UK, you're not allowed to grow. You can get medical cannabis. My understanding is in Canada, you can get a medical cannabis prescription, which you can convert to be able to license to grow a certain amount of plants for your medical needs. Is that correct?
Yes, here in Canada, you can get a medical license, and you can also have a medical license in this province. So that's another backwards thing, is You can have 4 plants, but you can have a medical license that will allow you to have hundreds of plants.
So the federal law, the overarching law of Canada, says that you can grow 4 plants for whatever you want to do with them. But in Manitoba, they're saying, no, we don't agree with that. We're a small little area, and we say, unlike the rest of Canada, that we're not going to allow that. And you are standing up against that kind of tyranny, and you are saying, no, I want the same rights as everybody else and my federal rights.
Exactly, 100%. And for medical patients, when you apply for a medical grow license, it takes some time. You got to see a doctor, paperwork, approval. In every other province, you can start 4 plants while you start that process. So you can have 4 plants growing while you're getting prescribed and approved. But here in Manitoba, you can't. Like, you're not allowed to. You'll get a $2,500 fine if they decide to fine you, which they can if they want, if they catch you. And so you have to sit there and wait until it could take months for your approval to come in, if at all. And then there's people in other provinces who can just put a seed in the ground before they even go to the prescription website.
So we call that postcode lottery here. Effectively, where you live determines how things are interpreted by the law. And you're obviously taking on the provincial government in Manitoba. How's it gone? How has the government responded to you? Have they kind of said, "Oh, hands up, yes, we'll change the law, but we'll take a while to get around it"? Or are they just saying, "No, sorry, Jesse, that's the way it is. You can't do it"?
The drawbridges are up, the archers are on the wall. It's like, we don't want you to grow. Let's see what you got, kind of thing.
But even with the weight of all your evidence, they're still saying that is not going to be acceptable in what is a giant geographical province, but relatively small population. I mean, I don't understand. That does not make sense to me.
It's a province of farmers as well. Like, we're prairies, so we grow a lot of different, a lot of the food here in Canada, and export it, of course. So we're really good at growing. But anyway, that's besides the point. It's you mind asking your question one more time? That's the one.
No. That's interesting. That's interesting, because if you're a province of farmers, is there a lot of cannabis growing on the industrial side there?
There are hemp farms here. To my knowledge, there aren't any outdoor THC farms in Manitoba.
Oh, so it's not a question of if everybody's allowed to grow, then the state will lose revenue from these big kind of institutional EU GMP certified grow facilities. It is just that they don't want the individual to grow. That doesn't.
Their arguments, broken down very easily, are they don't want people to grow 4 plants and sell into the black market. They don't want a child to break into your grow tent and take cannabis from the plant and eat it. They don't want mold from the humidity, and they don't want smell from the plants. They don't want fires from the grow lights. They're more aiming on like the 20-year-old lights versus the new LEDs. And they're worried about quality control. So in the quality control, they're like, oh, how will you know if there's no mold? How will you know if there's the THC's even there? And we have experts, doctors, executives who have all written expert affidavits attacking every single one of those points. And especially on the last one, like, get out of here. There's companies who don't charge a lot, but what you can do in other provinces is you take your sample of cannabis from, like, when your harvest is done, you mail it to them. They do a quick test, like, okay, it's perfect, a little bit heavy on the metal side, 17% THC, good job. And then, and then instead of going to a dispensary and spending between $3 to $20 a gram, you can have 400 grams in that one harvest after 4 months, and with 4 plants, if you do it properly. And then you're set for, could be the year, could be 6 months, however much you consume.
So that's the current state of play. What do you think the end result's going to be, and when do you think you're going to get that result?
At the end of the day, it's going to come down to who can argue the law better on, can the Manitoba government make this ban? So we've attacked and destroyed, in my opinion, all their reasons for putting the ban into place. But there's that one last obstacle. We'll talk another castle analogy. It's like, okay, we've gotten through the front gate, we're over the walls, but then we still have to get to the keep, right? Yeah, I'm speaking your language, brother.
It's been a long time since I've been trying to jump into a castle, but I get your point. Now, it's interesting because a very similar thing is going on in the UK, where there is a judicial challenge, or there is a judicial challenge to be mounted. There's a group here called See the Future. There's a group called We the Undersigned, and there's a personality called The Outlaw, who are all coming together to challenge the foundational evidence that cannabis is harmful. And this is one of the dichotomies that is a real challenge for the UK government. So we can import EU GMP grown cannabis, where EU GMP just means it's to a standard, and it's a pharmaceutical standard. So they're forcing a herbal medicine into a pharmaceutical standard. That means that it's grown in concrete and steel in highly controlled environments, probably without very much sunshine, which means its carbon footprint has increased exponentially. That is legal. That is Schedule 2. That is acceptable. That's a medicine. Now, the very same thing, Jesse, if you grow it in your garage or your attic or your front room, that plant now becomes toxic and a poison and something that has no justifiable medical use. And there is how do you create the evidence that it's based? The UK has laws about how laws should be created, and they should be just, and they should not serve the vested interests of the people that create the law. So there are these challenges, because now with GW Pharma and regulated access, the pension funds are investing in cannabis, which means you've got a vested interest in creating these large grow facilities while keeping people from growing their own, which can be much more beneficial, and people get pleasure and get therapeutic value from the very notion of growing, the very process of growing a plant. It's a very therapeutic thing. I think you'll agree.
I 100% agree. And on top of that, people who make their own beer or wine or, alcohol, depending on the country you live in, gifting is the biggest part of that. So here in Canada, you can legally gift 30 grams to another adult. So a big part in other provinces from people who are growing their own cannabis is they're sharing. You can exchange clones and genetics. You can exchange seeds. So when you in your homegrown tent, you can have male and a female. You can shake the male up, create a whole new genetic, or maybe someone's done it before, but then you can take those seeds or clippings and give them to someone else who can then start growing those and create their own thing. And obviously it's quite interesting. And people who live in condos who might not be able to grow from for condo reasons, they can have a friend who has a house who grows 4 plants, gives them 30 grams every little bit to sustain them, help them with their bills. It's like a whole community building thing, right?
Community. You took the words right out of my mouth. It is a community approach. That's remarkable. And it also is a counterbalance to the corporate approach of the EU GMP facilities. I think that's a very interesting process you've got going on there. And it's just Manitoba that are kind of putting the fly in the ointment, so to speak.
For now.
When your challenge gets them. Excellent. Just to work out, because we hear figures about Colorado, has there been a real change in the tax revenue that's generated in Canada and how it's spent and things?
Absolutely. There's been tons of revenue on the tax side for the government. When you look at the reports that are put out, I'll use Ontario, for example. The OCS, the Ontario Cannabis Store, That's a government run, we'll call it the head cannabis distribution and online store in Ontario. They put out quarterly results, and every quarter it's just a staggered growth, and it's really exciting to see. So another argument that the Manitoba government's kind of worried about is like, oh, this is going to stunt like our tax dollars. No one's going to go to the dispensaries anymore, all this stuff. But then you look at a province like Ontario, who's allowed home grow right from day one, and every quarter they put out results that are growing, even though people have the right to grow 4 plants. Like here in Manitoba, you can bottle as much wine as you want in your house, but people are still lined up for the liquor stores. Like it's not like ever since they allowed homebrew, it's like, hey, no one's buying beer. It's like there's always people coming in and out of there. Like people,
absolutely.
Especially new generations coming up, they want stuff quicker, faster. Now it's easier to go to a store and grab your container and then you're set, versus spending 4 months tending to your babies.
Absolutely, your babies. It's a labor of love. I know the feeling well. One of the things that I'm really interested in is obviously your experience now is Toba Grown, the kind of advocate moving forward, challenging government. But you've also worked in several cannabis companies in Canada. Have you any idea how many people are in the cannabis industry in Canada, and how have you found working in the cannabis industry?
So to give an example, actually yesterday was my 2-year anniversary at Canopy Growth, and they are an international cannabis company and quite large. If you know the Corona beer, that Corona is owned by Constellation, who has put massive investment into Canopy. So it's a very big partnership there. When I started 2 years ago, there was 3,300 people working in that one company. And there are tons of cannabis companies across the world. My experience, I started in Namaste Technologies. I started as the global wholesale manager. So I was selling vaporizers on the wholesale side in over 20 countries. I then was promoted to run Namaste MD, which was a medical prescription app that would prescribe patients medical cannabis and then assist them getting set up with the licensed producer of their choice, and then eventually our own licensed producer that we owned. And I was doing that job for about 2 years before Stores and Bickle. I'm sure you know who they are.
I know who they are.
Awesome.
Very good vaporizers, the best in the world, gotta say.
I agree. They've been around. You know, they invented the first volcano in 1996.
Is that when they invented the first volcano? 1990? Wow.
They spent time developing it, patenting it, and then the first one ever sold in USA was in 2000. And in 2018, Canopy Growth purchased the entire company of Stores and Bickle cash, over 200 million Canadian. And it was owned 50-50 by Jurgen Bickle and Marcus Stores, and very impressive company. I befriended both those gentlemen while working for Namaste. And when Canopy bought Stores and Bickle, Canopy said, you need someone to run North America. And both Mr. Bickle and Mr. Stores said my name. I was headhunted from Canopy, or from Namaste to Canopy. And for the last 2 years now, I've been running North American operations for Stores and Bickle. I've done tens of millions of dollars in sales over the last 2 years here. And we had 100% year growth in this territory. Very exciting things coming down the pipeline with some new product releases. And yeah, that's my job.
One of the interesting things here is I've never actually seen any data for the number of people here who vaporize compared to combust, but I'm going to estimate that it's around 30%. What is the kind of figure in North America? Do more people vaporize and combust, or are people still smoking joints there?
It's a wide variety here. There's a lot of people like bongs. Joints are still very prevalent. Not as much for sharing anymore because of obviously COVID.
Yeah.
But these are very hot too, like oil pens, the drinks and edibles. Like it's so awesome because there's so much choice here that an answer like that, and you'll never really know, right? Because I'm sure you can do surveys,
Yeah.
but not everyone's into that survey. There could be a massive amount of people you haven't even talked to that only like edibles, and that would throw the figures off a lot. So what I'm getting at is everyone has their own thing, and because there's so much choice, you can get your own thing.
That is a free market at work and within the regulated environment, and that's the opportunity that we all have. Right, just to kind of wrap up now, let's come back to the fact that you are a UK citizen, so you can be in Canada, you can consume what you want from the complete smorgasbord of what is available there, and then you come to the UK and you have nothing. Now, the challenge that you're mounting in Manitoba, if that's successful, are you going to come to the UK and challenge the UK government? Because the potential is that the UK government doesn't have a leg to stand on. We all swear allegiance to the Queen. The Queen in Canada allows the Canadian population to consume cannabis in any way it sees fit. And in the UK, they throw you in jail.
Well, I would never give away a long-term plan in business, personal life. That's just who I am. To answer that question, I have a massive opponent in front of me presently. They're well-funded, the Manitoba government, they're wanting to defend this. And I am getting a strong education in litigation. I'm using all the experience I have from international cannabis regulations, because to get a product from Germany where our products are made, cannabis product, into the North American market and getting it into shelves into each individual state. And recently I've been working with CBD and THC as well in USA. So learning every state's regulation on it and how we can, like, all this stuff, all this knowledge I've personally put into this challenge. I have a long list of experts who are willing to do another challenge with me. And yeah, I have a few in mind after this one.
Watch your space, maybe, is the answer to the question. Just keep on. Watch Toba Grown and see where it goes. Just to finish up, what do you think that the UK can learn from Canada? What mistakes did Canada make? And how can the UK learn from those mistakes? And what do you think the future will be 5 years, 10 years down the horizon?
One thing I'll say is it's very easy, and no offense to anyone, just saying a statement. It's very easy to sit back somewhere and look at what someone else has done and be like, oh, they did it wrong. Like, those goofy people, like what were they thinking? I think all the countries should look at Canada as like, okay, this is a country, a massive country, who took something that was illegal, made it legal. Bunch of different products are coming into the works there, companies, jobs. Yeah, sure, evaluations of companies might be a little off or not there yet, but look at what Canada has done, learn from our mistakes, partner with the people who've gained so much experience in this space, right? Because we're coming up on 3 years of legal recreational cannabis at a federal level, and people are getting more and more educated here on cannabis as they are around the world. So let's all work together, get this plant free around the world, and get more seeds.
Let me ask you a question. In 5 years, let's say 10 years. So where are we? 20, let's call it 2030. do you believe that cannabis will be as prevalent? Now, whenever I watch a television program, whenever anybody is stressed, the immediate thing they do is they will grab a bottle of wine or a beer or whatever. In 10 years' time, do you see that same television program will kind of be, they will be going to get a vaporizer or an edible because attitudes will have changed, and we know that cannabis is less harmful than alcohol?
I think so. If we look at a 10-year outlook, when you see cannabis in movies now, it's starting to pop up more, but it's more like on the taboo, like kind of funny, like, oh, that guy's vaping, but it's still legal, right? Like it's still kind of, there's a little bit of humor behind it. But I do think like one day when, someone has like their Corona or their whiskey or their Guinness. Sorry, I need to remember my audience here. The Guinness or similar. There's lots of amazing products over there in the UK. But yeah, one day just like nonchalantly in a movie talking and yeah, like, so this was happening, blah, 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 like nonchalant. That guy had some cannabis instead of alcohol in his mouth. Next scene.
Well, the reason I asked the question is there's a program on television here called The Affair, and one of the scenes in The Affair is they're in New York, and the lady, I won't go through the whole rigmarole, but basically she's having a vaporizer, just like you are, a kind of extract vaporizer, and she's having a stressful day, and the police come because she crashes the car, and they say, oh, she's got an eighth of marijuana. Why you guys still call it marijuana rather than cannabis? I have no idea, but you do. And that was at the time, we're talking 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think it was made, where it was illegal. And so she was arrested. Yet we see New York legalizing recreational access and allowing people to consume in dispensaries. So the world is going to change and
grow.
I mean, so fast.
No, and grow. I believe it's 6 plants they're allowed to grow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you see, it will change. Anybody who watches, I urge you to go to Toba Grown. There's merchandise available to support the cause. Jesse is a leader in the area in cannabis in Canada and has been for a very long time, and fighting a fight against the government that won't listen to the science. So I urge you to go there. Jesse, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed. By the way, just to show you how big canopy growth is, this is Spectrum Therapeutics. This is medical cannabis in the UK. And who's it grown by?
Who's it grown by? Is that what you said?
Who's it grown by? It's canopy growth. You
I thought you asked me who's a grown boy. I'm like, I am. I'm a grown boy.
No, it's grown by Canopy Growth. Canopy Growth owns Spectrum Therapeutics, who own Stores and Pickle Vaporizers. They are.
I thought I spoke fluent Tim until this. That one slipped by me.
On that bombshell, we will leave it and go our own separate ways. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you, Jesse. Thank you
as well, buddy.